What's up, everybody? My name is Mattatari, and today we are breaking down another Eldlich deck here in YuGiOh Master Duel. For those of you who are new or have not seen the previous video, we have already broken down my version of a budget form of Eldlich. I will link that here in the info card up at the top right of the video and also down in the description. But today we're going to be looking at a little bit more of a sophisticated version of this deck, as I like to say, a little bit more meta-friendly. Running this version of the deck has carried me to platinum the past couple of months here pretty easily. So let's go ahead and break down what we've got. Starting off, I like to run 2 Ash Blossoms. I have 3. You can certainly run 3, but I find that I've only ever used 2 max whenever I have 3. Like, I've never used all 3 in the same duel before. Like, I get it's one of those things that, you know, it's probably best to have 3 for your odds of pulling more, but I've only ever used a max of 2, and that's even if I draw into them. Next, you know, we got to be running 3 of our golden boy here, the Drip God. This should go without saying, but you absolutely need 3 Eldliches in your deck. Next, I run 1 Pot of Extravagance. I like running 1 just because I usually, if I draw into it, then I can just pop 1 for extra cards. And whenever I use more than 1, it usually gets Ash Blossoms. So it's all just based on how lucky you feel. You can certainly run more than 1. I typically only run 1 just to be on the safe side, so I don't go just burning through my entire extra deck. I also run 1 Lightning Storm. You can certainly sub this with Harpy's Feather Duster, but I like Lightning Storm because it gives you the option of either popping an entire row of monsters or an entire back row. I run 2 Elixirs of Black Awakening. This summons 1 zombie monster from your hand or deck in defense position. So if you draw into this and not an Eldlich, and it's your first turn, you're going first, and you need a monster just like for protection, you can certainly pop 1 of these, get an Eldlich on the field in defensive position, give you 2800 defense. But also later on in the game, if you already have 1 Eldlich on the field, you can pop 1 of these, put 1 in defensive position, so you have 2 on the field, and summon into any of your extra decks that revolve around Eldlich, which I'll get into a little bit later. Next up is 2 Cursed Eldlands. You definitely want to be running 2. It is limited to 2. You absolutely should be running 2. Pop 1 of these on the field, pay 800 life points, and basically get any Eldlich card from your deck for free into your hand. That also includes the traps as well. Torrential Tribute starts us off here with the traps. I was running more than 1, but anymore, I never really used this card as much as I thought I would, or at least coming up into platinum. It was a little bit more common in silver and gold, but if you pop 1 of these, it destroys all face-up monsters on the field. If you bring your Eldlich out from the graveyard and it has that boosted attack where it also is unaffected by card effects, this will destroy every card except for your Eldlich. It is a very convenient fail-safe. Next up is 3 Eldlixirs of Scarlet Sanguine. This will free summon a Eldlich from your deck or your graveyard onto the field. It will only have its base stats. It won't have any boosted stats. Again, kind of the same purpose of an Eldlich Black Awakening, except it is a trap. So if somebody pops your monsters and you need something to protect yourself, you can certainly pop 1 of these. Also, when this card gets sent to the graveyard, you can free summon any of these traps down here. Following the Eldlixir, I run 2 Dogmatica Punishments. This is one of the most slept on cards, especially with Eldlich decks, in my opinion. You put this on the field and your opponent summons a monster. You can sacrifice 1 of your extra deck monsters that has higher attack than that monster that they summoned, and immediately just delete that card off the field. If you're running Dogmatica Punishment and you aren't using all of your extra deck spots, it's usually a good idea to throw like an Ultimate Dragon in there, or like a Neo Eyes, any high attack Blue Eyes card that you get at the early game just for a free pop. Following Dogmatica, we run 3 Solemn Judgments. This card can be kind of tricky, but I highly recommend running 3. If you time these right, if you use these at the right spot at the right time, it completely shuts the game down. Your opponent is just going to most likely rage quit. Solemn Judgment will negate a summon as well as a spell or trap effect, but it does not work with card effects, which will bring us down to our next row. Magic Drain. I still like to run 1 Magic Drain. I was running 1 in the budget deck, and I did keep 1 here for the platinum version as well, just because I like running it off of Imperial Order. Imperial Order is the limited one, and when it is faced up on the field, it does negate all spells. This kind of does the same thing, but again in just a budget way, where if your opponent doesn't have another spell that they're willing to discard, it will negate the spell that they activate. Just in case case Imperial Order does get popped, I like having this as just the used if necessary backup plan. Following Magic Drain, we got 2 Solemn Strikes. I like running 2. I think 3 again is kind of the same deal with Ash Blossom. I've only ever used 2, only ever needed to use 2. This will negate all of the card effects. So when a monster would be special summoned or a monster effect is activated, you pay 1500 life points, it negates it and destroys the card. I run 1 gold land forever just because of all the negating trap cards that we already have. This is kind of like another one of those fail safes. If you have an Eldlich on the field, it basically can negate anything you need it to as long as you sacrifice your Eldlich, which really is not that big of a deal, especially if you have the Scarlet Sanguine on the field, or Black Awakening, or even one of these zombie traps down here. Now we're getting into a little bit more of the exciting trap cards, in my opinion, the continuous traps. I like running 3 Rivalry of Warlords here. Rivalry of Warlords states that each player can only control 1 type of monster. So if your opponent is running like a spellcaster deck with some insects, or like a machine deck with some dragons, they can only summon 1 type of monster on the field. It also barely affects you at all because 90% of the cards that you run in this deck are zombie cards. Following that, 3 skill drains. You know this card, you love this card, you probably hate this card. You have to be running 3 at all times. There's really no substitute for this card, but it is highly worth it if you can get 3 to craft 3. I run 1 summon limit just because I don't really use it as often as most people say that you should. This will limit only 2 monsters to be special summoned onto the field at the same time. It is a continuous trap. Usually I'll run it and I don't think it has too much of an effect, but in some decks it's good to have it when you're going up against certain kind of archetypes. And then following summon limit, we have Gozen Match, which is kind of like the step cousin of Rivalry of Warlords. Gozen Match is the same deal, except it's 1 attribute monster. So you can only use like light monsters or dark monsters, which most people don't really pay attention to, but some of these cards, man, they have some crazy attributes that most people don't realize they can't play until it's too late. Highly recommend, especially if you can get both of these popped on the field at the same time. It can cause some serious frustration. And then lastly, these zombie trap cards. We've got the Hakero of Golden Land and the Conquistador of Golden Land. Both of these are trap cards that you can play as monsters. They summon as level 5 zombie monsters, which you can use for some Xyz summoning. You can use the defend attacks, and if you have an Eldlich on the field, Hakero will banish 1 card. If you activate the trap and like special summon him as a monster, you can banish 1 card from your graveyard or your opponent's graveyard. And the Conquistador, if you pop 1 up on the field while you have Eldlich, can destroy 1 card on the field, no questions asked. So if your opponent has like a really annoying field spell or a continuous trap that's up that's just causing you all kinds of problems, you just pop 1 of these Conquistadors, bye. All right, now into the extra deck, which I think is one of the most exciting parts about this deck. Most people will say, oh, if you're running Eldlich, you don't even have to worry about your extra deck. I think so much of the Eldlich meta can be pushed in the extra deck that I love running some of these crazy unorthodox monsters that I don't really see too many people running with Eldlich. First up in the extra deck, we have number 61, which requires 2 level 5 monsters, which you can get from these 2 traps up here conveniently. This one is if you detach 1 material, you can target a monster that your opponent controls and then destroy that card. And if you do destroy that card, you can inflict equal to the destroyed monster's original attack damage to your opponent. So if your opponent has like a 4,000 attack monster, that's gonna hurt. Next, we have Shark Fortress. This one is again 2 level 5 monsters. Your opponent cannot target any monsters on the field except for Shark Fortress. And if you have an Eldlich on the field, if you detach 1 of the Xyz materials, you can select a monster that you have to attack twice. So if you have a boosted Eldlich with 3,500 attack, you detach 1 of the Xyz material here, that's 7,000 damage potentially. Next up is Crimson Knight Vampire Braum, which again is 2 level 5 zombie monsters. I like running this card just in case your opponent has something that out attacks these 2 monsters and they're gonna like swing at you. You can pop 1 of these on the field, get a cool easy 2,500 damage. You can detach 1 material from the card and then target 1 monster in your opponent's graveyard, special summon that target to your field, but that monster can only attack for the rest of your turn. So if your opponent has like some crazy beefed up monster in their graveyard, you can just yank that right out of there, use it on your side of the field, it's free. And then we've got number C103 Ragnafinity, 3 level 5 monsters, but once per turn, either player's turn, you can detach 1 Xyz material from this card, target 1 face-up monster your opponent controls, inflict the damage to your opponent equal to the difference between the monster's attack and current attack. And if you do, it banishes the monster as well. Next up is Super Dreadnought Rail Cannon. This monster, if you can run more than 1, do it. I only have one, but I wish I had more. That's definitely what my gyms will be going to whenever I get some more. This one requires 2 level 10 monsters, which will be 2 Eldliches. Then you pop that onto the field, detach 1 material, you do 2,000 damage to your opponent, no questions asked. And that also detaches an Eldlich, put him right back in the graveyard so you can cycle through him again. This card was made for Eldlich decks. Next is number 35, Ravenous Tarantula. I don't see really anybody running this card, and I think it's crazy. So in this deck, you do run a lot of cards that will drain your life points, like Solemn Judgment, Solemn Strike, Imperial Order. So you'll be taking a lot of damage potentially, running down to like the 2000s, maybe even the 1000s in terms of life points by the second turn potentially. And that's a big difference between your life points, your low life points, and your opponent's potentially full life points. Now, if you pop number 35 onto the field with 2 Eldliches, all monsters you control gain attack and defense equal to the difference of the life points between you and your opponent. So if you're down like 7,000 life points, that can be huge. Next up is Zeus. You know, every deck pretty much runs Zeus at this point. 2 level 12 monsters. We don't have any level 12 monsters, but you can pop Zeus onto the field with an Exceed summon monster. If you Exceed summon any monster, that's gonna trigger Zeus to be summoned onto the field in its place. And Zeus basically wipes the entire map, which can be great in case, you know, your opponent has Trap City or your opponent is just overwhelming you with like Sky Strikers, Tri Brigade, whatever. Then we've got your stapled links. Vampire Sucker would be 2 zombie monsters. It does special summon a monster from your opponent's graveyard onto the field that you can use for summoning requirements. Then Decode Talker, Transcode Talker, and Access Code Talker. You all know these cards. I like running these just in case, you know, sometimes when the stars align, you can bring an Access Code Talker onto the field. But I also like having these here just in case we use a Dogmatica Punishment. I can burn through one of these since I don't really like, you wouldn't use those that much given the deck archetype. And that is my breakdown of my version of the Eldlich deck. This deck again has carried me to platinum pretty easily. I don't really have to do too much thinking with this deck. I know that's kind of the running joke with Eldlich, but I love the way that I have this one set up in terms of, you know, kind of limiting what your opponent can do and carefully cycling through your Eldlich monsters to just kind of keep them in rotation. But let me know what you guys think about this deck. What would you add to it? What would you remove from it? I would love to try some new different versions of this. I am always down to try some new cards in rotation here. My name is Matt Atari. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all in the next video. Peace.